that you have created for my sister's.
I will never have that opportunity to hear her again.
The way you made my sister Ashley suffer while you drove her body in front of her children.
They stood looking at their mother covered in blood.
Emotional tears filled the testimony from family and friends of 20-year-old woman Haley J. O'Regan, an employee at a barber shop who was stabbed to death nearly 4 years ago. Her family and the survivors of the attack spoke directly to Damian Campbell, who took a plea deal in the case, resulting in a 42-year sentence.
If you remembered it all, it will be for what you've done to your victims and their families, and nothing more. Because you're a murderer, and that's the full sum of your parts of your life.
When your time comes, you will be cast into the same empty void that you have created for my sister's death. Your soul is forfeit, and you will never deserve to know peace, so may peace never come to you.
In 2020, Damian Campbell entered a diesel barber shop on Bendero Road, initially attempting to book a future appointment. According to an arrest affidavit, Campbell left, claiming he needed a credit card, but returned with a backpack, knife, and gun. While 2 employees survived the encounter, tragically, Haley J. O'Regan did not.
The last thing I think of every night and the first thing I think of every morning is what our Helly went through on the day you decided to do this.
One of the survivors, who was also stabbed in the attack, was present to address Campbell and share her experience.
But no amount of time will make the horrible memories go away. No amount of time will bring her back.
Campbell's lawyer mentioned they had been preparing for an insanity defense, but the court-ordered evaluation did not support that claim. Despite considering a trial, Campbell ultimately accepted the plea deal and pleaded guilty. He will serve sentences concurrently for the murder and 2 assaults, with eligibility for parole halfway through. The judge credited him for time already served in jail. Angelica Navarro de Paz showed no reaction as her sentence was handed down.
We assess her punishment at confinement in the Institutional Division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for a term of 20 years. In addition, we assess a fine of $10,000.
For 2 weeks, Navarro de Paz was full of emotions, but she showed no reaction as her sentence was handed down.
Hasta hoy en día no sé cómo cuidar a mis hijos porque están en peligro.
Up to now, to this day, I don't know how to take care of my children because they're in danger.
She was found guilty, and the same jury handed down the sentence.
The jury just came back with punishment verdict of 20 years, we believe that that's a reasonable and just punishment.
In 2017, Navarro de Paz was arrested for attempting to hire an undercover police officer to kill her boyfriend's sister, who owed her money. The prosecution hopes that the victim in this case can now live a life without fear.
I do hope that the victim in this case is able to rest at peace tonight, knowing that the person that victimized her for all this time, the person who did this to her, is going to be behind bars for the next 20 years.
Navarro de Paz must serve only a quarter of her 20-year sentence before she is eligible for parole. She is also reported to plan to file an appeal against the sentence. Consider the case of Anthony Boisvert, who is currently facing multiple felony charges in New Hampshire. Reports indicate that in 2016, Boisvert, then 29 years old, went on a crime spree. It all started with him setting fire to the First Baptist Church, a historic building that was constructed in 1870.
At least there's still some sign that there's going to be something there, and that there are people that have faith that are going to be building something that's good for the community again.
Prosecutors reported that he inflicted significant damage on the church.
Destroyed the church. The loss was estimated in excess of $2 million.
Shortly after, Boisvert ignited another fire at a nearby house, adding to the destruction.
As soon as we left, not even probably a half an hour later, he was found here trying to break in.
A resident recounted the shocking events.
Alarm goes off at 12:15. I opened my door, and the hallway was full of smoke.
Police reported that a couch in the basement was set on fire, but was fortunately extinguished by sprinklers before first responders arrived. A few days later, Boisvert escalated his actions by stabbing 2 residents of the Boulders condominiums in retaliation. Prosecutors stated that Boisvert believed the 2 victims had informed the police about the church fire.
Following starting these fires, at some point he became aware that 2 individuals may have given information to the Lebanon Police Department.
A neighbor remembered the horrifying scene.
There is blood everywhere. It looks like a scene you would see on TV.
She even saw Boisvert fleeing after the stabbing.
Saw Anthony running away, and then And then we look in Wade's apartment because he left the door wide open.
Boisvert was soon arrested outside his sister's apartment on Tannery Lane. Prosecutors described his appearance at the time of his arrest as disheveled and agitated.
The defendant was located shortly thereafter on Tannery Road in Lebanon and taken into custody. At the time that he was taken into custody, his clothing was covered in blood.
They also argued against his release, citing the continued danger he poses to the community.
Facts of this case are both disturbing as well as concerning in that if he is released, the state has no confidence that the community will be safe.
At this point, Boisvert became unhinged.
Mr. Boisvert.
You should give me about $500 bail so I can go and stab my cousin to death. Maybe kill my aunt and my uncle, Kevin. Maybe I can cut him up and eat him on fire.
During the sentencing, Boisvert expressed remorse for his actions and promised to seek help.
I just want to say I apologize for the First Baptist Church. Other than that, I apologize for my behaviors, and I hope I get help.
He was sentenced to serve a minimum of 25 years in prison, with a possible extension to 50 years. 2 women have been charged in separate child death cases and are now receiving plea deals, each resulting in less than 20 years in prison. Nicole Aguilad was accused of the death of her son, whose remains were discovered in Colorado in 2021. Evan Perez was charged with the death of a girl in her care in 2022. According to Eric Fernandez, both plea deals are being accepted. These cases highlight the severity of child injury charges and the potential prison time involved. Nicole Aguilad and her then-boyfriend Daniel Garcia were charged with the death of Aguilad's son, Dominic Aguilad Activero. Court records reveal that Dominic died at a hotel in northeast San Antonio. Aguilad and Garcia allegedly left his body in a ravine near Rocky Mountain State Park.
The state in Texas versus Nicole Garcia Aguilar.
Today, the state offered Nicole Aguilad a plea deal. Under this deal, the maximum sentence she can receive is 15 years, and the charges of tampering with evidence have been dismissed.
What is your plea to the charge of injury to a child causing serious bodily injury by omission? Is it guilty, not guilty, or no contest?
Guilty.
Nicole Aguilad will officially be sentenced on June 7th. Meanwhile, Evan Perez tearfully accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 18 years for the 2022 death of Ronnie Shella. Ronnie died from blunt force trauma to the head while under Perez's care. In court, Ronnie's mother delivered an emotional victim impact statement.
I will never get my daughter back. I will never have that opportunity to hear her again. I will never be able to see her beautiful smile anymore because you took that from me.
Both women are eligible for parole after serving half of their sentences. Nicole Aguilad will return to court later this month when her then-boyfriend, Daniel Garcia, goes on trial. A father forgave the man who killed his son. Matthew Wiesing was sentenced to 40 years as part of a plea deal for the 2022 murder of 23-year-old Michael Ekenese, who was a local teacher and coach. Eric Hernandez reports from the courtroom as the sentencing took place.
There was still some on his school lanyard and his coaching whistle. You murdered my son in cold blood. You crushed my whole family in one blow.
John Ekenese delivered a powerful, over 20-minute-long victim impact statement in the murder case of his son, Michael Ekenese. In March 2022, Michael, a Great Hearts Forest teacher and coach, was shot multiple times as he was leaving his apartment complex. The man charged with his murder, Matthew Wiesing, was reportedly upset that his ex-girlfriend had moved on and started dating Michael. Today, Wiesing accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 40 years in prison, showing some remorse in court.
I'm sorry I am for what I've done, and that I very much hope that the pain I have caused so many people, especially Michael's family, can, with time, heal.
In the end, despite his grief, John Ekenese told Matthew Wiesing that he forgave him and even offered him a gift.
I mentioned that Michael wore a blue rosary on his wrist, just like this one. I would like you to have this. And I know even if you can't take this particular rosary with you, you're going to a dark place, and I hope that at least the prayer can be a light in your darkness.
There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom after John Ekenese's emotional speech. As for Matthew Wiesing, he will now be transferred to a Texas prison and will be eligible for parole after serving half of his 40-year sentence. In the 226th District Court, 20-year-old Natalie Carrington faced Judge Velia Meza, who rejected a last-ditch motion to delay her sentencing. In July 2020, Carrington and a group of 6 others participated in the shooting of 19-year-old Jasmine Williams. At the time, Williams was at home with her 2 young children. Police reported that Williams' tennis shoes, piggy bank, debit card, and cell phone were stolen during the incident. Carrington, who was arrested for DWI in April, was initially charged with capital murder, but accepted a plea deal in May for a lesser charge.
To intervene in your life, to help you in your life, and to help you with a minimum sentence. And that's what I intend to do today.
Natalie Carrington was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Both the defense and prosecution noted that Carrington's testimony before the grand jury helped to re-indict the shooter, Phillips, after his charges had been dismissed.
Frankly, without cooperation in this case, we would have 7 people known to be involved in the murder, the assassination of Jasmine.
Despite this, Williams' sister, Hannah, expressed her dissatisfaction, stating that justice was not served that day, or with Carrington's co-defendant plea deals.
Justice really failed the judge, the prosecutor. I feel like he could have did more work, but he came in late. So there's a lot of stuff that wasn't said, a lot of stuff that was hidden, put under the rug, and yeah, it was failed.
The final co-defendant to be sentenced, Alyssa Wise, was also in court today. She had previously accepted a plea agreement where she pleaded guilty to a robbery charge and was to be granted a late settlement instead of jail time. However, Judge Meza rejected that deal. On January 11th, Ashley Lopez was last seen by her family. The 29-year-old was fatally struck by a vehicle after a large fight broke out at Angela Walk on South Picoso Street near downtown.
I'm not guilty, Your Honor.
Penny Gomez was arrested and charged with manslaughter. She asked the judge to withdraw the plea deal she had agreed to last week.
I didn't intentionally do it. I have witnesses as well, too. They were with me at the time. This is my life. I have kids. I have family that I need to go home to. I just want to have a chance to fight my case and show that my innocence.
Even after Gomez explained her reasoning to the judge in the 37th District Court, he still decided to proceed with the plea deal.
At that point in time, you had the opportunity to plead not guilty, and you did not.
I understand that now.
Okay, as such, I'm denying your request to withdraw your plea.
Judge Perez followed through with the agreed plea deal and sentenced Gomez to 12 years, a decision that Stanley was not satisfied with.
To me, you don't deserve to be released. I will be there in your parole hearings, making sure you don't get hurt. You don't hurt or do this to someone else.
I truly do hope that you suffer in life the way you made my sister Ashley suffer while you drug her body in front of her children.
Gomez will now be transferred to a Texas prison where she will serve half of her sentence before becoming eligible for parole. After being found guilty of the slaying, Gregorio Barrera has been sentenced to 50 years in prison. The body of 46-year-old Andres Andy Barrera was found buried in sand dunes near Corpus Christi in September of 2016. The cause of death was homicidal violence. His 50-year-old brother Gregorio was found guilty of inflicting that violence.
He was always a hard worker, responsible man. He was very caring.
Her description of her brother betrays the facts of the case. According to the jury's verdict, he's a killer. Prosecutors argued that true justice would be a life sentence, stating that it would serve justice for both brothers.
That is what you get when you murder your brother and you steal from your neighbors and you run from the police and you dump a man's body at the beach like he was nothing.
The police testified that Barrera's criminal record included theft, evading arrest, and driving drunk. His attorney did not request a specific sentence, but instead asked for a verdict consistent with justice.
Speak justice.
The sentencing hearing included an unusual level of security, with a dozen armed deputies and SWAT team officers present in the court. Deputies were stationed on either side of 33-year-old Moreno Lopez, who has a history of being dangerous both in and out of jail.
He has made threats in the past and perhaps
there are some concerns that he might try something today. He's like, I think he really has, I've got nothing to lose attitude.
4 years ago, Lopez and 2 others brutally attacked 35-year-old Jose Luis with a baseball bat, suffocated him, then dismembered his body. According to Lopez's trial, the murder was in retaliation for a drug deal that went bad.
It's been touch and go. There's been times when we haven't seen eye to eye.
He said there were threats during those times. I asked whether Lopez would testify during the hearing, which was expected to last at least 2 days.
It's up to him. I'll advise him, what I think he should or shouldn't do, but he has the right to make that decision, and he may very well want to speak his piece.
Lopez is facing a maximum sentence of life in prison. William Romer was sentenced to 75 years following a jury's guilty verdict for murder in a drunk driving crash that claimed the life of Gilbert Chavez in May 2012. Our cameras were present in court as Chavez's family confronted Romer during his sentencing.
For a term of 75 years. In addition, we assessed no fine.
Tears streamed down his face after he was sentenced for the death of Gilbert Travis. The unanimous decision covered all 3 charges: murder, intoxication, manslaughter, and manslaughter.
By drinking, he killed my son. By driving and drinking. I hope that the man learned something out of the whole deal.
Gilbert Chavez's family was able to meet his son's killer in court.
I told him I had forgiven him. I'm not going to bring my son back, but I'm glad we got justice.
This wasn't the first time William had been charged with drinking and driving. Yesterday, jurors learned he had been convicted and sent to prison for one of his 4 other drunken driving arrests. He was also arrested just 2 months before his trial began. As the case ends, Chavez hopes and encourages others not to drink and drive. Stephen Avery, born on July 9, 1962, in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, became the main point of a widely publicized wrongful conviction case. In July 1985, a woman was sexually assaulted on a beach near Lake Michigan. Despite having an alibi and being 40 miles away from the crime scene, Avery was identified as the perpetrator and convicted of rape and attempted murder, receiving a 32-year sentence. His appeals in 1987 and 1996 were denied. However, around 1995, a detective from Brown County suggested that someone else might have committed the assault, which eventually led to Avery's exoneration. In 2002, after 18 years in prison, the Wisconsin Innocence Project used DNA testing, which was not available at the time of his original trial, to pardon Avery. DNA evidence identified Gregory Allen, a man with a history of crimes against women who resembled Avery, as the actual perpetrator. Avery was released on September 11, 2003, but his life had been completely altered by this time. His wife had divorced him, and his family had become estranged. After being acquitted, Stephen Avery filed a civil lawsuit against Manitowoc County, the former sheriff, and the former district attorney, seeking $36 million in compensation for his wrongful conviction. Before the civil lawsuit could be resolved, Avery was arrested in November 2005 for the murder of Teresa Halbach, a photographer in Wisconsin. In 2007, he was convicted of her murder, plus an additional 5 years for a weapons charge, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The appeals court upheld this sentence. Lucia and Leo Krim were tragically murdered on the afternoon of October 25, 2012, at the La Rochelle apartment building on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York City. Their part-time caretaker, Jocelyn Ortega, was convicted of stabbing them to death with kitchen knives, while their mother, Marina Krim, and sister, Nessie, were a few blocks away at a swimming lesson. Upon returning home, Marina Krim and Nessie found Lucia and Leo dead in a bathtub. Ortega then began stabbing herself repeatedly in the neck, but survived her self-inflicted wounds. The building superintendent and his son also witnessed this horrifying scene. Ortega told police investigators that Lucia, who had defensive wounds, fought back during the attack while Leo was sleeping when it began. Ortega claimed she was upset because Marina Krim suggested she could do housework when she asked for more hours due to financial troubles. The NYPD and friends of the nanny said she indicated she was angry because the Krims would not pay her more money. However, family and friends who knew the Crims and Ortega's own family said that Ortega was close to the children and was treated very well by the Crims. The Crims even paid for her plane tickets to visit her family in the Dominican Republic and once accompanied her on vacation there. In November 2012, Ortega was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Over the next 5 years, she made approximately 90 court appearances. On April 18, 2018, Ortega was found guilty of first-degree and second-degree murder. On May 14, 2018, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In his ruling, Judge Carroll described Ortega as pure evil, criticizing her and her family for not seeking medical treatment for her depression and anxiety, and for hiding her condition from the Crims. This woman not only put her daughter in a harmful situation for drugs, but she also praised her afterward and gave her something dangerous as a reward. April's mother then looked the judge in the eyes and expressed her feelings.
I viewed the tape. I saw my granddaughter. I heard her small voice. It was horrific. Very horrific. How could she do this? How could she do this? I don't know if my granddaughter is going to be able to have a normal life.
Prosecutors say Courtroom went to great lengths to make her daughter look younger in order to appeal to a drug dealer with a preference for children.
All I can do is weep for her that the one person in the world, her mother, who is her first line of defense, you are your child's first line of defense, threw her under a bus because you wanted to get high.
Courtroom says that being sober for 16 months while in custody has helped her realize the severity of her actions.
It pains me that I have created and bestowed numerous amounts of psychological damage upon my daughter to selfishly feed my addiction.
However, her words did not influence Judge Leslie Giz's decision to ensure that Courtroom faces the consequences of her actions.
I'm going to have this court will have the kind of mercy on you that you had on your daughter, which is none.
Courtroom, now 32, was sentenced to 51 years to life in prison. The judge noted that the child is on multiple medications no child should be taking and is struggling with suicidal thoughts. Courtroom also has a son who is trying to cope with the situation. It was an unusual scene in Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. Franklin Williams, 32, faced charges for 3 armed robberies in Richmond Heights and Euclid. During his sentencing, Williams repeatedly ignored over a dozen warnings from Judge John Russo to stop talking, even interrupting his own attorneys multiple times over the 30-minute hearing.
I just met this attorney the other day.
That's fine. So,
and
I
came and took my cell phones yesterday, and they came and took all my property out my cell today.
Mr. Williams, I'm the judge in the matter. Shut your mouth, and I'll tell you when you can talk. You got it? It's the same rules we played by while we were here in trial, every time we were here for a pretrial. So just follow the same rules. Fair enough? So at this point, I'm going to hear from your lawyers, and that means zip it.
But you're not letting me tell
That
you
means
what's going on.
zip it right now.
You trying to?
Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't.
No. Does the comment quit talking? Do you understand that?
Because you're trying to take my life, Judge,
No.
and you're not letting me tell you what's going on.
Take
It's
your
not
life
fair.
for what? What do you mean your
It's
life?
not fair. You're trying to take my life.
What does that mean?
On the document.
Again, I'm going to interrupt. Mr. Williams, listen to me. If we have to, I will gag you in 1 second. So listen, you will get a chance to talk. I'm going to gag you in 1 second. So just listen to me. Zip it until I give you a chance to talk. You'll get a chance to talk. I am going to give you a chance to talk. Here it is again. So you said to me you understand this comment. Zip it. Right now.
Why don't you let it play about me getting shackled on the bus for a whole week? Let that play.
Mr. Williams will...
Mr. Williams, be very simple to gag you. You'll get a chance to speak. So tell me.
Black women just walked in here.
Okay,
so I have not even been around.
Let's go back.
Peers.
I'm zipping. Anything you want to add to your insanity? And the
put me on
jury
trial.
came back with the verdict.
That's a violation of the HIPPO law, Judge.
Here we go. I'm going to tape it, and then I'll unzip it when I want you to talk. Because the young lady over here can't take down everything You know how this works. We've been in the courtroom at least 50 times as we prepared for trial. I'll give him a chance.
In the end, Judge Russo sentenced Williams to 24 years in prison. 2016, in Detroit, Sergeant Kenneth Steele was killed by Marquise Cromer. The crime was so disturbing that the court's decision is crucial in deterring similar acts in the future. The prosecutor described the crime scene in detail, stressing how serious the incident was, but it didn't seem to influence the criminal's behavior.
All right, and what does that depict?
That was the wall that they were taking cover on.
Okay, move the admission of People's Proposed Exhibit 3.
No objection.
Court's permission to publish. Okay. And so, where do you see Sergeant Style? How far towards the back of the station along that wall is he?
The picture that depict, it's going to probably be right around where the words RIP are. There's some graffiti on the wall. It's like white, and it has the letters RIP on it.
I'm sorry, would you please point that out?
Yes, Your Honor. It's going to be approximately here where the graffiti on the wall, where it says RIP. He was approximately right here.
That's where you see Sergeant Style.
That is correct.
Roughly, where do you see Officer Cadez?
He was maybe one person length behind Sergeant Style.
And when you see them there, do you hear them saying anything?
No, I did not.
Okay. Do you see the person that you previously saw Sergeant Style pursuing?
Not at that second, no.
Okay. What do you do at that point?
At that point, I started walking to Sergeant Style because I was unsure of why we weren't still running.
Okay.
And at that point, that's when I heard the clank on the cement of a firearm hitting the ground.
Okay. And where were you positioned at that point that you heard the clank on the cement?
At that point, you have the map because it's not going to be on.
I put it back up.
At that point, our scout car is going to be right here in the parking lot, right just west of this pump right here. I'm right here, and I start walking towards the wall, but then I hear the noise over here.
Okay. And just for the record, that's about maybe 2/3 of the way to the east from the north west corner. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. When you hear that clank, what do you do then?
Immediately, it grabbed my attention, so I turned east, and I saw that a shotgun laying on the ground, and I saw the man that Sergeant Style was pursuing climbing the fence.
Okay. The you could see it from where you were positioned?
I could.
What did it look like?
It was a small sawed-off shotgun.
Okay. Approximately how long?
Approximately maybe 10 inches, 10 to 12 inches.
Okay. And the person that you said that you saw Sergeant Style pursuing, what was he doing?
At that point, he was climbing up the fence.
Okay. And the fence was what kind of a fence?
It was a chain link fence.
All right. Do you see that person in the courtroom today?
I do.
Where is he sitting and what is he wearing?
He's seated in front of the defense table, wearing a green jumpsuit.
As the record reflect the identification of the defendant. I'm going to show you, with the court's permission, two proposed exhibits. Okay, People's Proposed 5 and 6. What? That's where he went over the fence. Okay. Do you recognize these photographs, Officer Hyde?
Yes, I do.
And what is People's 5, the first one you have there? Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Officer. Would you state your full name for the record, please?
Yes, I'm Detroit Police Officer Ronald Cadez, badge number 4825.
All right.
Would you turn that microphone on? Oh, sorry about that.
Officer Cadez, how long have you been with the Detroit Police Department?
For a little over 2 years.
Okay. And back in September of 2016, did you work with did you work in the same precinct as Sergeant Style and Officer Rabier and Officer Hyde?
Yes.
Okay. Were you assigned to a patrol at that time?
Yes, I was.
And at that time, were you in full uniform like you are today?
Yes.
Okay. And were you in a fully marked scout car?
Yes, I was.
And on that date, September 12th, who were you working with?
I was with my partner, police officer Santa.
Okay. And what shift were the two of you working?
Platoon 3.
Oh, okay. And so you started at about what time of that night?
4 o'clock, 4 p.m.
Okay. Did there come a time when you found yourself in the area of Hayes and 7 Mile?
Yes.
And is that within your precinct, the 9th precinct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And did you go to that location in response to a run, or did you just happen to be there?
Response to a run.
Okay. And what was the nature of the run that you had that took you to that location?
It was for a wanted felon.
Okay. And what information did you have about the wanted felon that you were seeking? Like, as far as the description, did you have one?
Yes, like from what I recall, there was a description of a black male wearing a brown leather jacket, I believe blue shorts and black boots, wanted for somebody the previous day.
Okay. Did you know who the person that he was supposed to have shot the previous day was? Do you have any information about that?
No, I did not know who that person was.
Okay. Did you have any information about the approximate height of that individual that you were trying to locate?
I do not recall.
Okay. Tell me what your first observation was that got your attention that night.
Yeah, like the run location was at the 7 Mile and Hayes at the Coney time. So me and my partner, went to the Coney time. We parked in the parking lot to search, for the person we were looking for. Then from what I recall, a citizen in a blue, Dodge Charger made it known that the person we were looking for was across the street at the bus stop.
Okay. And when you, when that citizen made that information available, then what do you do?
I immediately, turned my head to my left and I started looking across the street at the bus stop for the person fitting the description.
Okay. The bus stop is directly across the street from the Coney time?
Yes, directly across the street.
Okay. Do you see an individual near the bus stop that you believed might be the person you were seeking?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me what was that person doing that you observed there near the bus stop?
From what I recall, I looked over the bus stop and I observed a guy, matching the description. What stuck out to me was that brown leather jacket. I observed that individual stand up and attempt to leave the bus stop area.
Okay. What do you do when you see him attempt to leave the bus stop area?
I advised him to stop.
How do you do that? In what kind of voice?
Through a verbal command, like a loud voice. Okay. He was across the street, a distance away, so I did project my voice, saying, "Hey, stop."
Okay. And do you identify yourself as a police officer?
From what I recall, yes.
Okay. Does the individual stop when you give that command?
From what I recall, the individual did not stop.
What did he do?
Continued walking. After walking, probably a few steps, he began to run across Hayes.
Okay. And do you give any more commands at that point?
Yeah, from what I recall, I said stop.
Okay. Do you see the person who you saw at the bus stop in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Where is he sitting and what is he wearing?
Sitting right in front of me wearing a green jumpsuit.
Ask the record reflect the identification of the defendant, Your Honor. Once that individual started running, where did he run towards?
From what I recall, he ran across Hayes, going behind the gas station.
Okay. And what do you do at that point?
At that point in time, I started in pursuit after the suspect. I started running.
Okay. Do you see any other police officers out there at that point in time?
Yes, I do.
Who do you see out there? What police officers do you see out there?
I observed my sergeant.
Which is who?
Sergeant Staff.
Okay. Who else do you see out there?
From what I recall, I knew there was other assisting members behind me.
Okay. Is your partner there with you, Officer Santa also?
Yeah, he's there, but however, he's behind me, so I can't, speak on what exactly they were doing.
Okay.
Mr. Cromer did enter guilty pleas with no contest pleads, guilty but mentally ill. And it's apparent to the court that Mr. Cromer has a history of serious mental illness. A review of the sentencing memorandum indicates that Mr. Cromer was recommended for inpatient treatment back in February of 2016, but because there was no beds available, Mr. Cromer was discharged from the Wayne County Jail back to the community. In September of 2016, there was a tragic chain of events that led to this unfortunate outcome for everyone involved. And I believe as a community, we owe it to our mentally ill, as well as our first responders, to call our elected officials to action and demand proper funding for mental health services. Mr. Cromer, pursuant to the sentence agreements that you entered into with the prosecutor's office, on 17-3971 on one count of assault with intent to commit rape, violence, harmless, or murder, is sentenced to serve a minimum of 5 years, a maximum of 2 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. On one count of felony firearm, is sentenced to serve a mandatory 2 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, which will run consecutive to the assault with intent to commit rape, violence, and harm. In case number 17-3972, on one count of carjacking, is sentenced to serve a minimum of 20 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, a maximum of 30 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. On one count of felony firearm, you're sentenced to serve a mandatory 2 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, and that count will run consecutive to the carjacking offense. In case number 17-3973, on one count of second-degree murder, you're sentenced to serve a minimum of 38 years, a maximum of 75 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. On one count of felony firearm, you're sentenced to serve a mandatory 2 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, consecutive to the murder second-degree count. The matters will run concurrent to one another. You'll receive credit for 523 days on the felony firearm counts. Ms. Keller, is there any restitution?
I have not had any requests for restitution submitted to me, Your Honor.
I'll set restitution amount to be determined within 90 days of today's proceedings. I'm going to set court costs an amount of $1,300, attorney fees amount of $400. You must pay a crime victim's assessment amount of $130, state costs an amount of $136, and that's on 17-3971. You must also pay a DNA fee amount of $60. On 17-3972, you must pay state costs amount of $136, a crime victim's assessment amount of $130. I waive the court cost attorney fee and DNA fee in light of the fact that they've been assessed. 17-3971. And 3973 must pay state costs amount of $136, a crime victim's assessment amount of $130, and again, I'll pay court costs, attorney fees, and DNA fee, by the fact that those fees have been assessed in 3971. You may file an application for leave to appeal your conviction and sentence. If you choose to do so, you must do so within 42 days. You cannot afford an attorney. The court will appoint an attorney. Furnish the attorney reports the transcript and record necessary to handle your appeal. This request must also be done within 42 days. Ms. Keller, as the 17-3971, is there a motion by the people?
Yes, Your Honor, we move to dismiss the remaining counts.
No objection. As the 17-3972.
Same motion.
And as the 17-3973.
Same motion.
No objection. Council will attach a copy of the sentencing memorandum in light of the fact that there is really no information in Mr. Cromer's pre-sentence investigation report as to his mental health history. Mr. Cromer, I wish you the best, sir. Thank you.
Marquise Cromer was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Sergeant Kenneth Stile. On July 27, 2015, in Lake County, Peggy Kostelnik was brutally killed by Juan Razo, bringing deep sorrow to the courtroom during the trial. The revelation of Razo's guilt and unsettling details about the case ignited the judge's fury, turning the courtroom into intense tension and outrage.
We need to know some facts about this case. I have somebody that we don't even know who he is, why he's in this country, why he's here illegally, and why he allegedly committed a murder. And you can't answer any questions to identify yourself. You have a birth certificate?
Yes.
Where is it?
From Mexico.
Well, that doesn't help me here in the United States. Where is it?
No, I don't have it.
Does he have a passport?
Mi pasaporte.
Does he have a green card?
En mi tarjeta residencial. Not that either.
I just want to add that the impact to our family has been more than most people will ever understand. From the outside, it appears that they have healed, that they are moving on, that it was a tragic event, but it is in the past. I can tell you that for Mary and our children, the shooting is not in the past. The events of that day get replayed over and over again. Just 1 week ago, our 11-year-old son, who so bravely ran to get help after seeing his mom, who called family and friends from the ambulance and hospital to let them know what happened. Just 1 week ago today, he broke down in tears, inconsolable, calling out for hours, why did this happen to us? Why did he hurt my mom? And why did he hurt us? And verbalizing the pain that he felt, saying it felt like his childhood had been taken away. That he just wants to be a normal kid. You know, he will carry this with him forever. People do not see their 7-year-old daughter, who on that day refused to leave her mother, on the bike trail, not because she was scared for herself, but because she knew that her mom was hurt. Struggle through her days because she was afraid to sleep at night. Dark circles around her eyes from being so tired. Every night after being tucked in, she would slip out of her bed and she would kneel at the window and pray for the hurt to go away. The memories of the event follow her during the day too. Playing in the yard, she would hear gunshots in the distance and stop, her eyes wide, and ask, "Are we safe?" My wife, Mary, has been impacted so much by the shooting, and in so many ways. Caring for her children, being strong for them. Physically, she looks like she is healed, but a simple hug around her shoulders causes her to wince in pain and rub her arm to try to get the pain to stop. The countless times she's been in a store or restaurant or other public place and has frozen with anxiety, the color gone from her face. The countless trips to the counselors for herself and the kids. The anxiety that keeps her from going to see a movie, sit in a crowded restaurant, go see a baseball game. She has fought the internal struggle of being absolutely terrified, yet still sitting in a crowded amphitheater to watch our son in a school choir performance. The shooting is not in the past for them. They relive it every day. Mary and our kids will carry this with them for the rest of their lives. And if I may, my children who have not had much of a voice in this, they've asked me to read their impact statements for others to hear. My daughter, who was 6 at the time, she wrote this. She wrote, "I have nightmares because of you. You hurt me a lot, meanie. You hurt my mom. He is so mean. Judge, I don't like him, Judge. Keep him in jail." And from my son, who was 10 that day, he wrote, I have nightmares a lot and have been having a lot of flashbacks. I've been having trouble getting through my day at school. I'm mad at you because you hurt my mom. My summer ended that day. I wish I could have stopped you.
August 27th was a warm, sunny day, and I decided to take the kids over to Greenway Corridor Bike Trail early afternoon. We walked down the path and we were enjoying our day. My kids were racing and singing. My daughter was 6 and my son was 10. We turned around to walk back up the trail and my kids would race and stop at each bench. And I would tease them by running by them as if I could possibly be faster than the two of them. They would in turn jump off the bench and run past me laughing, and we were having a great time. Then a shot rang out and both of my kids screamed. I told them to be quiet. It must just be someone shooting a BB gun. A second shot rang out and I was struck in the arm. I then yelled, "You jerk, stop shooting. I have kids down here." A third shot came, and it was when we started to scream for help. It was then I noticed I was covered in blood. I instructed my kids to run and get help. My son took off without looking back. My son was so brave, he ran almost a mile alone. My daughter didn't run. She started to, but she came back to me, and I will never forget the look of terror upon her face. She struggled to leave and listen or stay with me. She was terrified, afraid someone would take her. She was struggling with what to do when yet another shot came and then another. I begged her to run. She finally ran away up the trail again, almost a mile, alone, a 6-year-old little girl with the image of her mother covered in blood. I tried to run and felt faint. I was losing a lot of pressure on my wound, but the blood kept coming. I had to start walking, terrified my kids from danger. When I emerged from the trail, I saw my daughter banging on the walk button as hard as she could to cross the street, still with a look of terror. At this point, I could see my son, and I knew he was safe as there was a police car in the parking lot. I took the shortest path and I walked into oncoming traffic. Shortly after, I was in the grass on the side of the road, and my daughter was standing beside me crying. It was my son that helped my daughter cross the street and then went to the car to make calls to his father and family. My kids were there alone with no caretaker as they stood looking at their mother covered in blood. When the officer arrived, he quickly let me know that it was a .22 that had shot me. I was already in shock, but the knowledge that someone tried to kill us was beyond what I could process right then. It was not too long before the ambulance arrived, and I remember telling my kids that I was going to be okay, over and over again, trying not only to convince them, but myself as well. The ambulance ride was filled with my daughter being terrified and my son desperately trying to reach people, and he finally gave up the phone calls, and he lowered his head to pray. At the hospital, I was told there was a manhunt going on, and someone had been murdered. I felt horrible and terrified, and what if they were going to come back for me? I mean, this man who did evil things was still out there. I was alive, my kids were alive, I'll always have shrapnel in my arm. It was surreal walking into the waiting room to see the news on every channel, manhunt. At that time, it was thought there was an accomplice, and I was terrified he would come for us. Kids and I didn't sleep. We were terrified. Physically, I couldn't dress myself due to my wound. Every task was difficult for weeks. My husband had to take time off work to care for us. And what does one do the day after an attempted murder? Well, first, one must walk through the scene with the detectives. And it was so weird and hard being back there just 2 days later. But then we did what we knew. We took the kids to their swim lessons and just remained in a state of shock. We tried to keep the kids in the most normal setting we could. Neither of them were sleeping. Their nights filled with terror as mine. I would become scared as soon as my husband would leave for work in the morning. Every noise, every unknown person, everything was scary. I couldn't go into a store without being so anxious. I had to leave. I could not continue my life as normal at all. I would be at a stoplight and wonder if the person next to me would shoot me. I was afraid to be alone on the sidewalk. I would not walk anywhere. Even checking the mail scared me. We now live in a new reality. It wasn't long before my daughter started counseling and my son wasn't ready yet. Our weeks quickly became filled with appointments, being at the victim advocate office, meeting with police, prosecution, counselors, etc., and we completely lost the rest of our summer. My husband's vacation days that he was saving for a trip to Disney, he used to take care of us, and the trip was canceled. We didn't have a choice. I don't think any of us could emotionally handle the road trip anyway. We were still pretty much scared of everything. The shooting changed everything about our lives. We moved in August as well, and the kids started new schools. My daughter's anxiety rose. It was too much for her while processing the shooting. She's been homeschooled since October. My son has had to deal with kids mentioning the shooting at school. They don't mean anything by it, but he has to deal with that emergence of emotions at any given time. I deranged my life around ensuring the best I could do to keep my kids feeling secure.
Peggy was my late father's sister and always more than just an aunt to me. She was like a second mother to my brothers, my wife, and me. To our beautiful 4-year-old daughters, she was like a grandma and a best friend. Peggy and I were very close. We did many things together and we talked daily. She went above and beyond the call of duty to support me and my family in our endeavors. Sometimes that meant driving for hours to watch boxing matches or spending whole days in cold barns to cheer us on at horse shows. No matter what, we counted on Peggy and she counted on us to make the most out of life. Peggy was always in a good mood and had the ability to instantly put a smile on your face. I was lucky that in addition to being close to her personally, we ended up working for the city of Willoughby, just a few steps away from one another. We made time to go out to lunch often, and of course she would always buy, because she could never resist the urge to give. We really did so much together. To my twins, Aunt Peggy played a role much greater than words can describe. She viewed them almost as her own adopted children or grandchildren, visiting them weekly so she could absorb the energy from their smiling faces and watch them grow. Peggy would always talk about how proud she was of the girls over the littlest things. Everyone knew about the twins because Peggy spoke of them constantly. Her love had truly no limits. I can't begin to express what the defendant has taken from my family. We will remember July 27th, 2015 forever. After hearing that there was an active shooter by her house, I started calling Peggy frantically to make sure that she was home safe, unknowing that he had already murdered her. I will remember that day forever as one of the worst days of my life. Trying to wrap my own head around the situation was difficult. To my girls, it was impossible to understand why someone would hurt Peggy. There's no easy way to tell 4-year-olds that someone they love was murdered, but my wife and I did the best we could. Unfortunately, the grim details weren't easy to hide once Peggy's face was on the news, and they heard that she was shot. Routinely, I still get called into their rooms at night, having to try and explain what happened to Peggy. There are no answers that 4-year-olds can fully comprehend. They always ask if the same man is going to come to our house at night to hurt us. Each time, I have to explain that I am there to protect them and that that man that hurt Peggy will be in prison until the day he dies, so that he can never hurt anyone again. These are the most difficult conversations I have ever had to have. My daughters may only be 4 years old, but they understand that they will never be able to see Peggy again. They sing about her, they draw pictures of her, they even wear jewelry that reminds them of her style. Oftentimes, I'll be driving with the girls and they will look up into the clouds and ask me if that's Peggy's cloud in heaven. I could go on forever about how this has impacted my family and me. The defendant has cut short many great memories that would have been made. He has taught horrible acts of violence to young children, and he has taken away a mother figure from me. Life will never be the same. Holidays, birthdays, and everyday life will be missing something beautiful and kind. We will always find ways to remember. One thing I know is that my daughters will never forget Peggy, and we will make sure of it by teaching them to live their lives the same way, the same pure and generous way that Peggy lived hers. Peggy was a hippie, the kindest-hearted, least judgmental person I have ever met. She never spoke badly of anyone and was able to find the good in everyone in every situation. I'm sure that Peggy would have even tried to help the defendant had he not harmed her. Because simply put, that is just the way she was. Peggy put others before herself and tried to help everyone no matter what.
Total fine is $180,000. Also ordering that you pay restitution. Death penalty specifications contained in count 11 is dismissed, are dismissed. Okay. Is that covered?
That covers that, Your Honor. You didn't make the consecutive findings.
That was next. Okay. Followed by the. Is there any further question?
Your Honor, just so the record is clear, the state is also dismissing the death specification from count 12. And the defendant has 276 days of credit.
And the time served. Thank you. The specification in count 12, which count 12 merged into 11. But count 12, the death specifications are also dismissed.
Also, Your Honor, the court would like the court to find that the defendant has been convicted of felonies and is suspected of hearing, and therefore direct the clerk of courts pursuant to 2909-30 to notify the immigration investigation of the United States Department of Homeland Security.
And the clerk of court is directed to do so under that statute.
Yes, they are.
Juan Razo was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Peggy Kostelnik. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.